I should have known something was off the day my fiancé's mother showed up unannounced with a smug smile plastered across her face and a cake that felt more like a bribe than a gift. The scent of vanilla and deceit wafted through my apartment as she handed it to me, her eyes scanning the room like a detective looking for evidence of unworthiness. I was already on edge. Pregnancy hormones, a recent move, and wedding planning had stretched me thin, but something about her that day chilled me more than usual. She hovered around, poking at things, asking questions masked as compliments. How could we afford this apartment on my salary? Was I really sure I was eating right for the baby? Did I think it was smart to delay the wedding because of the pregnancy? I smiled, nodded, and bit my tongue until it bled. I had learned to survive her passive-aggressive digs by building a fortress of politeness. But that day she wasn't just being controlling. She was on a mission. I noticed her eyes lingered on the framed sonogram on our bookshelf. She stared at it longer than necessary, her lips twitching as if holding back a smirk. I should have ripped it from the wall right then and asked her to leave. But instead I offered her tea. 2 days later my world began to unravel. It started with my fiancé, Michael, coming home from work tense and quiet. He wouldn't meet my eyes, and when I pressed, he brushed me off with a flimsy excuse about stress at the office. That wasn't like him. Michael was always the one to open up, to lean on me. I watched him retreat into himself like a stranger wearing my lover's skin. The distance grew with each passing day. At night he started sleeping closer to the edge of the bed. He left early in the mornings and came home late, showering before I could smell his clothes. The texts became shorter. The affection faded. My instincts screamed, but I couldn't prove anything. I thought maybe the pregnancy had scared him, maybe it was all moving too fast. I blamed myself. I always did. And then it happened. I came home from a doctor's appointment to find a sealed envelope on the kitchen counter with my name on it, scrawled in his handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it, but nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. A paternity test. A fake one. The paper claimed the child I was carrying wasn't his. It was impossible. Michael was the only man I'd been with. But it was stamped, sealed, and tucked in an envelope like a loaded gun. My knees buckled. I fell to the floor and clutched my belly, sobbing in silence as the walls around me cracked open. Every part of me knew this was orchestrated. This wasn't some spontaneous suspicion. This was planted. The next thing I knew, Michael was standing over me, his face expressionless, his voice cold. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't offer to talk. He simply told me I needed to leave before the week ended. That his mother was right. That this baby wasn't his. That he couldn't trust me anymore. His mother. Of course. This had her fingerprints all over it. She never wanted me to be part of their family, and now she had succeeded. She had poisoned him against me with lies, forged a fake test, and shattered our life without even blinking. I tried to show him my medical records, my prenatal visits. He refused to look. His mind was already made up. In the span of a week, I went from preparing for a baby with the man I loved to packing boxes for a life I no longer recognized. My apartment, our apartment, turned cold and unfamiliar. The walls that once echoed with laughter now pulsed with betrayal. I moved in with an old friend from college who offered her guest room without asking too many questions. But every night I lay awake staring at the ceiling, one hand on my belly, one hand over my shattered heart. I wasn't just grieving a relationship, I was grieving the life I thought I was building. The family I was creating. And it had all been ripped away with a single forged document. But grief, I learned, has a way of sharpening into something else. It didn't take long before my tears dried and turned into resolve. I might have been down, but I wasn't destroyed. There was still one thing they didn't count on. I had proof. Real proof. And I was going to use it. Grief made me quiet at first, but quiet wasn't the same as weak. I stayed with my friend Tasha, who offered me more than just a room. She gave me space to breathe, to think, to cry in the dark without judgment. The first few days were a blur. I barely ate. I stared at my phone, waiting for a call that never came. But as the weight of what happened settled into my bones, something inside me began to shift. I had never been the type of woman to play victim. I had built a life from scratch before I ever met Michael. I didn't need saving. What I needed, what my baby needed, was justice. One evening as I sat staring at the fake paternity test again, something clicked. I stopped crying. I stopped shaking. I took a deep breath, sat at the edge of the bed and pulled out my laptop. I needed to trace the lie. I called the clinic, printed on the fake test result. The number rang 3 times before a nurse picked up. When I asked if Michael had ever come in for a paternity test, she told me, politely but firmly, that no such test had been conducted under his name or mine. I pressed further, giving her the serial number from the bottom of the document. After a moment she returned and told me the number was invalid. It was all fabricated. I stared at the paper again. The fonts were slightly off. The logo slightly blurred. Sloppy work, but convincing enough to fool someone who wanted to believe it. That was the worst part. Michael had been looking for a reason to leave. And his mother handed him one on a silver platter. So I made a list. The fake paternity test? I'd prove it was forged. The breakup? I'd uncover how his mother manipulated him. The baby? I'd protect my child's future from these people at all costs. I started with my medical records. I requested full documentation of every visit, ultrasound, blood test, and vitals since I discovered I was pregnant. Everything was in order. Then I had a new, legally supervised paternity test done, this time with a lawyer's witness present. The result was indisputable. Michael was the father. No ambiguity, no margin for error. I had the truth in my hands. Now I needed to figure out how to use it. But then came the next blow. A few days later I went to retrieve some of my belongings from the apartment. Michael wasn't home, but his mother was. She opened the door with that same smug smile, as if this was all part of her master plan. I asked her calmly to let me gather my things. She refused. "You're not welcome here anymore," she said, crossing her arms. "You've made enough trouble. Go back to whatever hole you crawled out of." I stood frozen for a second, my hand tightening around the strap of my purse. I wasn't just being erased, I was being erased with glee. This woman had taken everything from me and acted like it was a favor. I turned away without another word. Fighting her directly would be a waste of energy. She lived for drama. But as I walked back to my car, I promised myself one thing. I would never let that woman near my child. Not now. Not ever. Later that week, I saw something that confirmed all my suspicions. A friend of mine who still followed Michael on social media sent me a screenshot of a photo he posted. It was of him, his mother, and, shockingly, a new woman. They were having dinner together, smiling like the world hadn't just been flipped upside down. The caption read, "Family is everything. You always end up with the people who truly have your back." I nearly vomited. That's when I realized it had all been a setup. The timing wasn't random. His mother had been planning this for months. She had planted seeds of doubt in his mind, sabotaged our relationship, and the moment I got pregnant, she knew exactly how to strike. Because with me gone, she had full access to her son again. And probably handpicked the new girl to replace me. But the joke was on them. They thought they had won. They thought I'd crawl away humiliated and disappear. What they didn't know was that I had already contacted a lawyer. And not just any lawyer, but a fierce woman named Desiree with a reputation for tearing apart false paternity and custody cases. I handed her the fake test, the real test, the clinic report, and a log of every disturbing interaction I'd had with Michael and his mother. She didn't blink. "We're going to destroy them," Desiree said, flipping through the documents. "No one steals your future and gets away with it." For the first time in weeks, I felt something warm rise in my chest. Not just hope, power. Because now I had the one thing they could never control. The truth. And I was going to make them choke on it. The courtroom was silent except for the clicking of my heels as I walked in, head high, heart pounding. I wasn't here for revenge. I was here for justice. But deep down, I won't lie. I wanted them to feel just an ounce of the pain they caused me. I wanted Michael to look me in the eyes and see the woman he had thrown away for a lie. I wanted his mother to feel the humiliation of her carefully spun story unraveling in public. Desiree, my lawyer, leaned over and whispered, "Keep your face calm no matter what happens. Let the evidence do the talking." The judge took his seat. Michael sat across from me in a navy suit, Looking smug, his mother by his side with her trademark faux concern plastered across her face. They still thought they had this under control. That wouldn't last long. Desiree stood and presented the paternity test. The real one, administered at a certified facility, witnessed, dated, and sealed. The judge examined it. "And you're saying this contradicts the document submitted previously?" Desiree nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. My client was presented with a fake paternity test by her fiancé, which was used as justification to end their engagement and deny her access to shared property. We have statements from the clinic confirming they never issued the original document." Gasps rippled across the courtroom. Michael shifted uncomfortably, but his mother's face remained stone cold, until the next bomb dropped. "And we have a forensic document examiner prepared to testify that the original test was fabricated using a template found on a public internet forum. The date stamps, document number, and clinic logo were all digitally altered. This was a calculated forgery meant to manipulate our client." That was when panic began to flicker across Michael's face. I looked him dead in the eye. And then the twist that changed everything landed like a grenade. Desiree pulled out a folder and handed it to the judge. "Additionally, Your Honor, we have evidence that Mr. Adams' mother, Mrs. Elaine Adams, used a private investigator and accessed my client's private health records without her consent." Michael whipped his head toward his mother. "What?" But the judge was already raising his voice. "Is this true, Mrs. Adams?" Elaine stammered, for the first time visibly shaken. I was just trying to protect my son." She was lying to him. She tricked him into believing the baby was his. I stood calm and still. "The baby is his. And you knew it. You forged that test because you couldn't stand the idea of not being in control of his life. You never saw me as family. You saw me as an obstacle." The judge ordered a short recess to review the documents. Michael didn't look at me. Not once. But as we left the courtroom for the break, I overheard him hiss to his mother, "You lied to me. You lied about everything." She reached for him, but he jerked his arm away. That should have felt good, but strangely it didn't. Because the damage was already done. He didn't just believe the lie, he wanted to believe it. He let his mother whisper poison into his ear and did nothing to stop it. That wasn't love. That wasn't partnership. That wasn't a man I could ever trust again. So when he tried to approach me during the recess, face pale and eyes pleading, I held up my hand. "No, Michael," I said loud enough for his mother to hear. "You made your choice. You broke my heart and tried to destroy my reputation in one stroke. There's no coming back from that." "I didn't know it was fake," he said weakly. "I swear I didn't know." "But you didn't ask either," I snapped. "You didn't even give me a chance to defend myself. You discarded me like trash. That's not love. That's cowardice." His jaw clenched. Behind him, Elaine scowled, arms crossed, clearly realizing that she was losing control of the narrative, and of her son. And then the final blow. I turned to him and added, "By the way, I've filed for full custody. And I'll be submitting all the evidence we just presented today to support it. Including the fact that your mother illegally accessed my medical records and forged a paternity test. That environment is toxic for a child." His eyes widened. "Wait, you can't do that." "I can. And I will. Because this wasn't about hurting him. This was about protecting my baby from a legacy of manipulation, deceit, and emotional abuse." Later, back in the courtroom, the judge ruled in my favor. My name was cleared. The forged test was officially dismissed. And I was granted temporary full custody until a formal hearing could be scheduled. Michael would need to undergo parenting classes and counseling before any visitation rights could be discussed. As I walked out of that courtroom, head held high, I knew something had changed. I was no longer the broken woman sobbing in a friend's guest bedroom. I was a mother, a fighter, and a woman reborn through betrayal. But karma hadn't finished yet. Because what happened next, even I didn't see coming. The fallout was immediate. The courtroom, once tense with accusations and quiet murmurs, erupted into stunned silence as the truth hung in the air like a blade suspended mid-drop. The judge ordered an immediate investigation into the fraudulent DNA test and directed that full custody be restored to me. But the legal victory was only the beginning. My mother-in-law, Evelyn, was escorted out by bailiffs, her smug expression completely wiped away. For once she had nothing to say. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Watching the woman who had tried to obliterate my existence walk out in disgrace was more satisfying than any insult I could have hurled her way. But I wasn't just fighting for a courtroom win. I was fighting to stitch my life back together, piece by painful piece. Returning home with my baby felt surreal. I sat on the nursery floor holding her tiny body against my chest, breathing in her scent like it was oxygen. I whispered every promise I could think of into her ear, that I would never let anyone take her from me again, that I'd always fight for her. That I'd make sure she knew she was wanted, by me if no one else. But healing wasn't instant. The betrayal had dug deep and my ex-husband Logan didn't just vanish. He called, he begged, he blamed his mother, he played the victim crying that he'd been manipulated. I didn't buy it. Not anymore. Because somewhere along the way he had chosen silence. He had chosen to turn his back on me when it mattered most. And now he'd lost the right to call himself a father. The courts agreed. After uncovering Evelyn's fake paternity documents, courtesy of my tech-savvy friends digging, they granted me full legal custody. Logan was restricted to supervised visits, and even those were under review after he was found to have known about the falsified results and done nothing. The best part? The medical records proved the switch was intentional. A lab technician confessed to being paid off. It was enough for criminal charges against Evelyn and her accomplices. She was indicted for forgery, obstruction of justice, and child endangerment. Suddenly, the woman who had acted like queen of the world was being photographed in an orange jumpsuit. But karma had one more card to play. A local news station caught wind of the story. It became a media storm. Mother-in-law fakes DNA test to steal baby. The headline flashed across screens and racked up views. Evelyn's social standing, built on illusion and power plays, crumbled in public shame. Her bridge club turned on her. Her country club revoked her membership. She was a pariah in the very world she once lorded over. Still, even with justice being served, I carried scars. The nights of sleeping alone, terrified my daughter would be ripped from my arms again. The anxiety of every knock on the door. The constant questioning, how did I not see it coming? How did I trust them? I started therapy. I needed to understand how my instincts had been dulled, how I'd allowed myself to be gaslit by people who smiled to my face and stabbed me in the back. I didn't want to be bitter. I wanted to be better. Slowly the pieces started coming together. I found a part-time job working remotely, which gave me the flexibility to care for my daughter and reclaim some financial independence. I enrolled in a few online classes. Every step forward was a small rebellion against the version of myself they tried to destroy. My support system, those who had believed in me, never wavered. Friends dropped off meals, offered babysitting, sent messages late at night reminding me that I was stronger than I felt. That I wasn't alone. And most importantly, my daughter thrived. The dark circles faded from beneath her eyes. Her laughter returned. She started calling me Mommy, again without fear, without hesitation. We were healing together. But the most transformative moment came a few weeks after the court ruling, when I stood in front of a mirror, holding her on my hip. I didn't see the broken woman anymore. I saw someone who had been shattered but rebuilt, stronger, wiser, unshakable. And I knew the story wasn't just about how they tried to take everything from me. It was about how they failed. They say time heals all wounds, but I've learned it's not just time. It's truth, it's justice, it's standing back up every time life knocks you down. And when I stood in the stillness of my living room that morning, sunlight filtering through the curtains as my daughter scribbled with crayons on the floor, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace. Real soul-deep peace. Evelyn's sentencing had come swiftly. The courtroom was packed that day. I didn't go to gloat. I went to bear witness. I needed to see the system affirm what I already knew, that what she did wasn't just cruel, it was criminal. The judge didn't mince words. He called her actions a deliberate and premeditated attempt to sever a mother from her child, and handed down a 5-year prison sentence with no chance of parole for the first 3. The courtroom gasped. Evelyn's mask cracked again. The woman who once sneered down her nose at me now looked utterly hollow. And I walked out of that courthouse with my head held high, my daughter's hand in mine. Logan tried to repair the damage. He sent letters, voice messages, even flowers on my birthday. But the bridge had burned and I had no interest in rebuilding it. The court eventually stripped him of parental rights after he missed 3 consecutive supervised visits. I didn't push for it, he sealed his own fate. I was done fighting for people who never fought for me. Instead, I poured my energy into us. I started a blog detailing my journey, part therapy, part advocacy. It caught fire. Women wrote to me from everywhere. Mothers who had been gaslit, underestimated, silenced. They shared stories of custody battles, false accusations, manipulative in-laws. My pain had found purpose. My voice, once trembling, had turned into a rallying cry. We moved out of the old house, the one filled with ghosts and gaslighting. I bought a small, cozy home in a quiet neighborhood far from the chaos. It wasn't flashy, but it was ours. A safe space built on truth. My daughter flourished. Her drawings were brighter. Her laughter louder. Her trust stronger. We planted flowers in the front yard. Sunflowers mostly. She said they reminded her of me. They grow even when it's hard, she said one day. She didn't know just how right she was. One sunny afternoon about a year after everything exploded, I took her to the beach. As we walked along the shore, her tiny footprints beside mine, I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. For so long I'd been the woman who lost everything. The woman accused. The woman left behind. But now, I was the woman who came back. Who fought like hell and won. Who turned betrayal into a battle cry. Who made a home out of broken pieces and filled it with light. And as the waves lapped at my ankles and my daughter giggled ahead of me, twirling in the breeze, I made myself one last promise. Never again would I let someone else write my story. I'm the author now. And this story is just getting started. Thanks for being part of this emotional ride. If this story gripped you, made your heart race, or gave you chills, do me a favor, like, comment, share, and subscribe. We drop new stories every single day, each one more intense than the last. And trust me, tomorrow's might just top this one. You won't want to miss what's next.